active in this community for those 90 years, doing such things as supporting a whole laundry list of very worthy organizations, such as the St. Barnabas Soup Kitchen, the Yamhill County Historical Society, Red Cross. We do help them with the blood drive. The American Cancer Society, Relay for Life. We participate in Turkey Rama. We help out Habitat for Humanity, Henderson House, Special Olympics, YCAP, Juliet's House, and a host of others. We also are active in raising money to distribute through the community. We just concluded our Bids for Kids auction a couple weeks ago, and it was the most successful effort ever, and we raised a good deal of money, which will be turned right back around and put back into the greater McMinnville community. This is a special meeting, as has become an election year tradition. We are hosting a candidates forum today. So because of that, we will dispense and not do our typical Kiwanis things. We won't have the happy dollars, we won't have the fines. There will be some quick announcements. First announcement is that there will be no board meeting on Monday the 13th. I'm going to be out of town. I'll be coming back late that evening to McMinnville, and I'm still trying to schedule it. I think Cassie is back, so that'll help us get the financials out, and then the plan is to turn around and give information for next year's finances to the chairs of the various committees so that you can do your budget requests, and then we'll have a board meeting to hopefully approve the budget requests, and we can move on with our brand new Kiwanis year, which started on October 1. And the next thing is, are there any other announcements before we have Steve come up? With no further announcements, I'd invite Steve to come up and he can introduce the candidates in the forum. Thank you.
Well, this is, I'm not sure how long we've been doing these forums, but it dates back at least 16 years. I know.
AM 1260 KLYC, we're broadcasting live from the McMinnville Grand Ballroom. Candidates Forum, House District 24. Steve Bagwell is with the News Register. He's at the podium right now. Let's go to the podium.
Council, he's a gentleman here in the bright yellow tie who will come up here in a minute. The Kiwanis Club hosts the forum, but it is sponsored by the three local media outlets. KLYC is represented here by co-owner Dave Adams, KLYC Radio, our local radio station, and which will be broadcasting the proceedings live. McMinnville Community Media, and I know Jerry Eichten, the director, is here somewhere, where he was earlier. We've got a couple of his crew here, and the News Register. I am the Manchiana News Register. One of my hats, and the other is program chair for the Kiwanis Club, and we are represented over here by Nicole Montesano, one of our reporters. I'm going to let John talk about, introduce the candidates. This is a Legislative House District 24 race, and talk about the mechanics of how the program will work and how you can participate. Thank you.
Hello, that worked. Thanks, Steve. I think I'm just going to sit here rather than get up there, because it'll take me a long time to get up there. So I think what should happen is the two candidates should grab a couple of chairs up there on the dais, and then they can have access to that microphone. What's going to happen is this is a forum that features the Republican and Democratic candidates for State District 24. The Republican candidate is Jim Weidner, to my left. The Democratic candidate is Ken Moore. Now, what happened at the beginning of the meeting is there was a coin flip to determine who would go first. So Jim Weidner is going to go first. He will give a 3-minute opening statement. Then Ken will give a 3-minute opening statement. And then I will ask the same question to both candidates who will alternate. So Jim speaks first 3 minutes, Ken second 3 minutes, then Ken gets the first question. He'll have 2 minutes to answer it. Jim will have 2 minutes to answer the same question, and so on. Now, I have a lot of questions prepared, but I also invite questions from the audience. So if something pops into your head and there's an answer that you want to have to a question, write it down on one of the note cards on the table, and Steve will get it to me, and I'll do my best to get it in. So with that being said, I'd like to start the forum with a 3-minute presentation by Jim Weidner. Jim?
Excuse me just for a minute, Jim. Could everyone please make sure they have their phones turned off, please, or turned down? There will be one phone that will be on, and that will be mine right here on the timekeeper.
Okay, if you didn't hear Eric, he'd like everyone to turn off your telephones.
Jim, Eric will be flashing 2 minutes, 1 minute, half minute, and 0.
Perfect.
Okay, I think we're ready to go, Jim, when you're ready.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Kiwanis for hosting this event, and like to thank you for all that you do for the kids across the community and your successful Bids for Kids program that you just had. Just hearing about the amount of money and everything you raised, it's great to have groups like the Kiwanis around doing what you're doing. We have the Lions Club, who's always working on optical issues for people that are in need, and without groups like this, our community wouldn't be what it is today. And that's one of the things that makes me proud of Yamhill County is we are very active in our community, and we make a difference. You look at the coordinated care organizations that have been started, the way individual groups, churches, and everybody have gotten involved. We probably have one of the most successful programs there are in the state. I mean, it's easily, we're setting ourselves above everybody else, and we're a model program for coordinated care organizations in the state. So with that, I just want to thank you for having me here today. I look forward to your questions, letting you know a little bit about myself. I was born and raised right here in Yamhill County, actually here in McMinnville at the old McMinnville Hospital. So I'd like to say it was the new McMinnville Hospital, but I'm a little older than that at this point. With that, I grew up in the town of outside of Yamhill, about 1.5 miles, and have raised my family there and continue to live there. When my wife and I first got married, we were in Newburgh for a short period of time, and have just enjoyed serving Yamhill County for the last basically 6 years, and I'm looking at going to 8 years as your state representative and serving constituents. That's probably one of the greatest honors I've had, is doing constituent bills or helping with constituent issues. We've had bakeries that we've taken undue burden off of our local bakeries that were having to pay an extra $600 fine or $600 fee to basically be able to make cookies. Bread, unfortified bread, was illegal to make in the state. We got rid of that to where we can have true organic breads in the state. Another bill that we'd introduced and passed. Local liens that are put on properties used to sell for the max of what the lien was. We actually were able to get rid of that to where if the state government goes to foreclose, they actually have to sell it for 80% of fair market value. So there's a lot of things that we've done to help out constituents here in Yamhill County. We've always left our door wide open and look at it that it is your office and that we work for you, and anything that you need done, we look to take care of for you. So with that, my time is up, and I look forward to your questions.
I would like to thank the Kiwanis for their 90 years of service in our community. It's good to be here. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background and how it will help me serve as your representative in the legislature. 35 years ago, I moved here, and out in the woods outside Yamhill, I got a chainsaw, I felled some trees, and I used the lumber to build our house with my hands, raised 3 kids in it. They all graduated from Yamhill Carleton High School. I've farmed this ground, oats and alfalfa. I'll tell you, there's nothing like sitting on top of a 15-foot stack of hay in the barn that you've watched grow, harvested, baled, and stacked. I love this land. As a young man, I earned my degrees in applied physics and computer science, and I work for Intel and Hewlett-Packard. I know something about engineering and manufacturing. I've served as president of the board of my church, and there I had great community and spiritual experiences. I am currently a small business owner. I'm a licensed, bonded, insured handyman. My tagline in the yellow pages is "Call me, I can fix it." I know something about small business. For 10 years, I served as the president of the board at Gallery Theater, where year after year on a shoestring budget, we delivered quality entertainment. I know something about community service. I volunteered in the schools. I've been an Aspire counselor in the high school, and I brought to town, McMinnville and Hillsborough, a program that helps special ed kids in our classrooms, turning I can't into I can. I know something about education. I know something about all of these things because I've had opportunity. And I want to make sure that all the members of the district of House District 24 have opportunity for education and living wage jobs. Thank you.
Gentlemen, the first question goes to Ken Moore. Ken, you want to stand up? And I'll ask you the first question. You'll have 2 minutes to respond to this, and then after you sit down, Jim will have 2 minutes. Question 1. In Oregon, the sale of hard liquor is regulated by the OLCC. Some believe that Oregon should follow Washington and privatize the sale. Do you support privatization of the sale of hard liquor? Why or why not?
I think that the state of Oregon has done a good job regulating the sale of our liquor. I think that it is as decided by the vote of the people that that's the way that they want it. I think that there could be benefits from moving to privatization, but I think this is the way it's going to stay, and I think it's been a good system so far.
Jim, would you like to hear the question again, or I'll read it again?
Privatization?
In Oregon, the sale of hard liquor is regulated by the OLCC. Some believe that Oregon should follow Washington and privatize the sale. Do you support privatization of the sale of hard liquor? Why or why not?
This is actually an issue that has come up in the legislature several times here recently because of what's going on in Washington. And personally, it's one of those that becomes a tough issue for me because I'm very much open to free market and everything, but I see devastating effects of hard liquor being in stores with our youth being able to go in and take it off shelves, even though some states I've looked in California where they've actually policed it fairly well, but kids are still able to go in and pick it up out of the grocery store, so I have some serious concerns with it. And at this point, I probably wouldn't support the privatization of it. I would have to see how we address a lot of the issues that are out there, but I'm not in favor of what the state does to some of the, basically the way they handle the liquor licenses for different places. So there's a lot of things that could be fixed on the alcohol or privatization issue with alcohol. So, but right now I would probably leave things alone and not do anything at this point.
Thanks. You get the next question, Jim. What are the two most important land use issues that should be addressed by the next legislature?
Oh, we have lots of issues with land use. So, but one of the big things that I actually sit on the Emergency Preparedness and Management Committee, and we're looking at doing some stuff for just the urban expansion of cities, for changing urban growth boundaries and things like that, especially on the Coast Range. They can't expand into the hills because it's forest ground. So it's stopping the growth of cities into areas that would make sense. And this is a bill that we will be bringing forward out of my office to change that. And it's probably the biggest thing that's facing us right now is the urban growth boundary being able to grow in a direction that would basically help our cities out and also start building our fire departments, our hospitals, our schools out of danger zones where right now they're in threat of tsunamis, earthquakes, things like that. So that's probably the biggest issue that we're facing in land use. The other one would be the fact where businesses, where they want to expand or locate, one person can throw up a red flag and stop the development of a business. That is another issue that we need to work on, streamlining and speeding up the process. I know in our local communities here, we've had projects and urban growth boundaries that it's taken years and years to actually develop or change them just because of our land use laws that are in place now. So we work with Oregonians in Action on that, and we will have a couple bills, but one that I do have right now is just dealing with emergency preparedness and being able to change the urban growth boundary to where cities can start expanding into areas where they're not in threat of tsunamis or earthquakes. So, and that is a bill out of my office.
Thank you, Ken. What are the two most important land use issues that should be addressed by the next legislature?
As I've visited farmers, almost the first thing they say when I get out of the car, shake their hand, they say, the biggest concern, the biggest threat to my operation is urban sprawl. Why do they say that? When houses get near farms, that interface starts to create friction. The people in the houses complain about the noise and the odor and the dust, and the price of farm ground goes up. It's difficult for a farmer to make a profit on expensive ground. That's an issue. The good news around the urban growth boundary process is that there are rule changes going into place that I support. Those rule changes include making the process more transparent to cities that are applying to grow their urban growth boundary so that they won't be tied up in years of expensive litigation. Let me give you an example of one of these changes. One of the issues that often comes to light is that the argument is over how fast will this city grow? What is the projected growth rate? The city says we're going to grow real fast, and the people that don't want that growth say, no, you're not going to grow that fast, and they litigate on that for years. Well, Portland State University does a study that will now be accepted as the accepted growth rate. So that will not be a point of litigation anymore. A community that's applying for a boundary change can plug that number into their proposal, and that will be accepted. It's streamlining this process. Our land use system is not broken. It needs to be modified. It's made Oregon the beautiful and wonderful place that is today. Cities do need to grow. The urban growth boundary does need to expand, and for good reason, and I support that.
Next one's for you, Ken. This is question 3. Some people criticize the Oregon income tax system as unfair. Are there any changes to the state tax code that you would support to improve our income tax system?
The income tax system, if there's a change, I think it would be around the loopholes that are granted to multi-million-dollar corporations that still are paying zero income tax. They are wonderful to have in our community. They are receiving the benefit of our schools and our roads, and I want for them, and I think we all do, to make their fair contribution to that. So I think our income tax, without a sales tax, which is how the voters have voted, is high. And that's because we don't have that other piece, and I support that. So if there was a change in income tax, it would be to shift the burden so that taxes are more fair.
Thanks, Jim. Would you like to hear the question?
If you want to.
Some people criticize the Oregon income tax system as unfair. Are there any changes to the state tax code that you would support to improve our income tax system?
For me, taxes, it's just about knowing what you're up against. I'm not against the income tax system. I'm okay with the income tax system we have in place. Ken got into talking about corporate tax. This is where we're probably going to differ completely, because when we're an income tax driven state, I would be a strong supporter of a very low corporate tax of say 2% or 3%, because those are the people that are hiring people here in the state that are making income, that are paying the taxes, so we have more revenue at the state. So it's using that to incentivize companies to move to Oregon, and we can do that with the income tax. It's just knowing what you're dealing with. So people talk about a sales tax, doing different things like that, and switching things around, and I'm not a big supporter of a sales tax. Wouldn't never recommend it unless we were getting rid of a tax. One of the things I do get concerned about, really concerned about, is our property taxes and the way they're going up and the way it affects our senior citizens, because their income's going down, their property taxes are going up, and there are places in McMinnville, different communities, where you're paying $3,000, $5,000 a year just in property taxes. So if we could shift some of the burden off of them and there was a tax plan to do something like that, I would be very supportive of doing that, but I don't really see that happening. And right now I would just keep things the way they are and then look at using the corporate tax to incentivize businesses to move here and hire people the way we have, to have more income coming into the state and more people actually paying taxes.
Thank you. Next question's yours, Jim. The Oregon Constitution reserves legislative authority to the voters through the initiative process. Are there changes that would improve the Oregon initiative process? If so, what are they?
I'm very happy with the initiative process, the way it works right now. There's not really much we could do to change it to make it any better than what it is. Sometimes we'll be sticklers on signatures and things like that and signature gathering, but the initiative process is put in place to hold legislators accountable. So when we're making decisions that the people don't want, the people have a way to overturn what we've done. And I think the initiative process is a very important piece of the political process for the state of Oregon.
Ken?
The initiative process is one thing that makes Oregon special, and I support it. We have had initiatives come from the people that have made a big difference in our state. Things that the legislature couldn't quite bring themselves to do because it wasn't politically advantageous, so that the people rose up, wrote a measure, and had it passed, and I think that's a great thing.
Thank you. Next, this is your question, Ken. This is a question from the audience. How important do you feel is state support of human services such as education and community conflict resolution centers?
Would you read that again, please?
How important do you feel is state support of human services such as education and community conflict resolution centers?
State support of human services, education, and community conflict. Well, I'd like to speak to education and human services. I had a wonderful meeting just yesterday with Sue Linsmeyer. She's the executive director of Head Start and also the co-chair of our early learning development hub, early learning hub. There, I got it right. She gave me a 2.5-hour lecture flyover of what's being offered at Head Start and through our early learning hub, and it is amazing. She talked to me about Head Start and how these people are ready to wrap their arms around entire families, helping them with the causes and the cures of generational poverty. So unlike my opponent, I would vote to continue funding to Head Start. Unlike my opponent, I will vote to continue funding to the early learning hubs. This has made quite an impression on me and how we are reaching out to people at risk. The poorest of the poor are served by these programs. It is essential. Education. I will vote for the programs that help train our people in vocations, technical education, a bill that my opponent missed voting for. I will vote for the bills that support education and finding stable funding. It is essential for our legislature to support all of these things.
Jim, would you like to hear this?
I know it. Well, I guess Ken better check things because my wife works for Head Start, so I know Head Start very well. She's an employee with Head Start, and they've been in my office. There's a lot of things that I support that Head Start does. When it comes to the Oregon, as far as assistance and everything, I'm a very strong proponent of we need to be helping people get off the system. So when you're dealing with human services, we need to take people in, we need to educate them, put them on a path to getting back to work, not putting them on a path to dependence. And unfortunately, that's where our system is right now. Lots of times we're having generational dependence on the Oregon Health Plan. So these are, or the Oregon Health System and DHS. We need to find ways to incentivize and encourage people to get off the system, to get out and support themselves and not be dependent on government. Education, I was a very strong proponent of taking education out of the political battlefield. We had a bill that we introduced that was giving education K through 12, and I came to this working with Mary Alice Russell, our own superintendent right here in McMinnville, where we would fund education at $6.9 billion, give them a 3% increase from this point forward. Now the political battle stops between the union and the schools because they know what their funding is going to be the next year. Right now, education is getting killed because they don't know how much money they're going to have the next biennium. They're dependent on legislators, and they come and they start lobbying us for the amount of money they need to fund their services and their programs and to keep the school going. They should have something put in place that's stable for them so they're not used as a political tool. And that's what's wrong with the political process. So.
Thanks. Next one's yours too, Jim. This needs a little background before I ask the question. So first, the background. For many years, several Oregon counties relied on timber revenue and no property taxes to provide public safety services. When timber revenues began to decrease, Congress provided payments to those counties to backfill the loss of timber revenue. Those payments have greatly diminished. Little or no funds other than property tax dollars are available in counties like Josephine and Curry to fund regular sheriff patrols. Now here's the question. Is it the state's responsibility to make sure there is a minimum level of law enforcement in those counties, or is it purely a local question of whether the voters are willing to pay for a minimum level of law enforcement with property tax dollars? That
is actually a very, very complex question in dealing with. And one of the things is I have 120 seconds to deal with it too. Josephine County has been devastated. We are fortunate here in Yamhill County. We were very dependent on tax revenue from timber dollars as well. But our county commissioners that we had took that into consideration, put money aside and everything to cover it. Polk County is hurting right now as well. I mean, this is spread in all of our rural counties because we've lost timber dollars from federal land. It's one of those issues where I fault our federal representation a little bit because they haven't fought to open up the federal ground for us to harvest the timber that's there to fund a lot of these programs. And I think it's actually our federal delegation is the one that should be doing it and making sure that we maintain the services, because right now the federal government is holding up timber that could be harvested in some of our worst forests that we have, and mismanaged forests are our federal grounds. The federal, if they're going to have federal timber here and not allow us to take the timber off of that to fund our education, or actually it's our sheriff's departments, then we should be charging them rent, because the state should be taking that ground back. And it's the same thing with our state timber. We need to look at harvesting that, because that's how we did fund education. That's how we funded our police. And this is a very serious issue that we've been battling, and this is actually where you get the Republican and Democrat battle all the time. You have Republicans wanting to harvest, Democrats wanting to shut it down, and that's what I see happen every session. This will be my 4th session if I'm reelected, and I know that battle is going to continue to happen. And you look at what's happened in Medford, in Southern Oregon, Grants Pass, it is awful. There's nobody there. Right now, Yamhill County, we're having the battle with Polk County just to help them out. So my time's up.
Thank you. Ken, the question without the background. Is it the state's responsibility to make sure there is a minimum level of law enforcement in those counties, or is it purely a local question of whether the voters are willing to pay for a minimum level of law enforcement with property tax dollars?
I think there, excuse me, there are 3 players that are in this game. One is the federal government. There is a bill being worked through Congress bless them, but it will fill about half that $35 million gap that is left by the ONC County payments being discontinued. That I am supportive of. As a state legislator, I will be in conversation with that delegation because I am for increased logging on our federal grounds. We need to utilize that resource. The same with our state grounds. I won't be characterized as a Democrat that is against using our resources on state grounds. The third player in this is the local people. In Curry County, the part of their property tax that goes toward law enforcement is 38 cents on $1,000 of valuation. That's about 1/4 of the average of the state. So some responsibility does lie locally. They have voted several times to keep their tax at about 1/4 of the standard rate. Now, I have sympathy, I have compassion for them. That area is devastated. But those are the three players that need to be in that game. And as a legislator, I will be in that game, helping that funding come to support that law enforcement in those counties.
Thank you. Next question to yours, Ken. If elected, will you seek changes in any rules in your own caucus to make the legislative process more efficient? If so, which rules should be changed?
I came to this position as a candidate because I have seen the weariness of our people around divisiveness and gridlock. In my service in the community, I've had success in gathering people together and listening, not for just what they're saying, but why they're saying it, and finding common ground. That is the spirit that I will represent our district with in the legislature. I don't really care what someone's party is. I want to get into a conversation about what's good for the district, what's good for the state. If there are people pulling me to one side or the other based on my party lines, I won't be interested in that conversation. I will be interested in responding to what I've been hearing at thousands of doors that I've been knocking on, their concerns, and me being eyeball to eyeball to them, feeling the force of what they are telling me, being changed by what I've heard. And that is the spirit I will take to the legislature in our district. And I think that will make a difference in our representation. I will not be left out of the conversation. I will not be extreme. So that is how I will change the dynamic for our district in the legislature.
Thanks. Jim, if elected or re-elected, will you seek changes in any rules in your own caucus to make the legislative process more efficient? If so, which rules should be changed?
You know, the legislative process actually, believe it or not, with all the flaws and everything in it, it works very well. I've been in the minority. I started in the super minority. I got elected the same year as President Obama. And it was 24 Republicans, 36 Democrats. They could pass anything that they wanted to. And we were able to work across the aisle, get stuff done and heard the way the process was. So there were laws that I would actually get tucked into other bills that I had presented. I couldn't get it heard because I was a Republican, but I was able to work with Democrats and get the legislation put into another bill to where the law would get passed. One of them was a rapid repat bill that dealt with illegal immigration or illegal immigrants that were here and committed a crime that would deport them back to their own country. I was able to get that put into a piece of legislation and passed. Even being in the minority, I've been able to pass a lot of legislation when it makes sense and you sit down and you work with someone across the aisle on certain issues, because you hear the big battles between Republican and Democrat. We probably agree on about 85% of the issues. It's just 15% that's out there where basically you have the decisiveness. And those could be labor laws, they could be abortion, it could be a number of things, and you're not going to change those issues. That's where Republicans and Democrats differentiate themselves. So it's basically who's helping them out and who's making things happen. And where things are at right now, a legislator, if you're willing to work with people, you're going to get a lot done. And I'm proud to say, people will call me an extremist, but I probably pass more legislation than anybody else in my caucus because I do work with people across the aisle. I have basically the Democratic leader's phone number right here on my phone and could call her right now while we're in this debate, and she's probably going to answer, and you would hear her say some funny things to me and everything, because we became very good friends through the process. So no, I would not change anything.
Thanks. Next question is yours, Jim. Oregon law says that if a corporation loses a class action lawsuit, it has to establish a fund to pay claims of its members of the class. If there is money in the fund that hasn't been distributed by the deadline, the money is returned to the corporation. In the last legislative session, a bill was introduced to change the law so that any money not claimed was distributed to legal aid to pay for the legal services for people who couldn't afford a lawyer. The bill failed, but will likely be reintroduced. Do you support the concept of the surplus going to legal aid? If not, why not?
Well, I might have been one of the reasons that bill didn't go anywhere, because I probably was a no on that bill because it went through a committee that I was on. And the reason I don't support it is you'll have lots of different groups that are there that'll tie up corporations in legal battles over issues time and time again, and you have attorneys that are there just to make money and a living off of that. No offense against the attorneys over here, so government lawyer. But it's one of those issues that becomes very complex because I know that people need the opportunity, but lots of times it's taken care of in the class action lawsuit. Everything's dispersed. What's not dispersed to me should go back to the corporation, and they should receive that money back. So I do not support that.
Ken, a question for you. Do you support the concept of the surplus going to fund legal aid? If not, why not?
And the money was from corporate.
When there's a class action lawsuit and let's say the corporation loses, it has to establish a fund to pay the plaintiffs. But there's a certain amount of time that money can be claimed against that fund. Now, when the time expires, the money goes back in Oregon to the plaintiff, or to the defendant, the corporation gets the money back. There was a bill last year to say that if money is left over after the deadline expires, it will be used to fund legal aid. So the question is, do you support that concept of this surplus going back to fund legal aid? And if you don't, why don't you?
Thank you. Well, I think if there was a class action lawsuit and the corporation had their corporate lawyers fighting tooth and nail for that money and they lost, that money probably is not rightfully theirs anymore. They deserve to have made reparations for whatever that was. So should the money go back to them? No. Where should it go? Legal aid. Now, the legal aid lawyers that I know are not in it for getting rich. They're in there for defending people that can't defend themselves. I think that's a worthy cause. I would like to be in on the conversation of, are there other worthy causes that money could go to, in addition to legal aid?
Thank you. Next question is yours, Ken. Going to confuse you. A generation ago, trial court judges in Oregon had great discretion in sentencing persons convicted of committing crimes. Then the law changed to establish sentencing guidelines that took away much of the judge's discretion. Later, the voters approved an initiative measure to create mandatory minimum sentences for certain crimes. Should circuit court judges have greater discretion in sentencing, or are the current laws regarding sentencing guidelines and mandatory minimum sentences about right?
Here's what I've been hearing about this issue. Many people that have told me stories about how the minimum sentencing guidelines have sent their son or daughter away for a long time, and when I hear the circumstances around it, it sounds tragic. I've also learned about a program that's called evidence-based sentencing, which somehow is able to work with the current law in looking at a matrix of factors around the individual and tailoring that sentence to what will be most effective for that individual. And this program that's active in our county, it's a pilot program, it's a very big compliment to our county that we have this program being tried out here, has reduced the jail time sentences by 11%, And so far, the results of that on the criminal, the rehabilitation has been good. So I think that there is a swing back in this pendulum away from the severity, the draconian minimum sentencing, and we have learned what that has done to people and also to our prison system. And I support this matrix of assigning jail time with results-based sentencing.
Thanks. Jim, should circuit court judges have greater discretion in sentencing, or are the current laws regarding sentencing guidelines and mandatory minimum sentences about right?
I support, actually, minimum sentences. I've had to deal with victims in my office, people that have been tragically, there's been people raped, people that have had loved ones murdered, that have came in, we've talked with, and they're worried about a judge who's cutting the sentence short because the prisons are full or things like that. So the reason we have mandatory sentencing is because of judges that do things like that, and it's been put out to the voters, and the voters have said, no, we want these mandatory sentences. And whenever there's a victim involved, I think we have to stand up for the victim, not the perpetrator. So I support mandatory sentences. I think we need to stand up for the rights of victims more than we do perpetrators, because I have the decision myself to decide, do I want to go in and commit this offense, this violent offense, somebody, and I know that I should serve the time if I do that offense. But the person that I committed that crime again does not have that choice. They were standing there innocently, and they were the ones who were attacked and hurt. So I am very supportive of mandatory sentences.
Thanks. Next question's yours. Before I ask the question, I'll tell you that this is the last question on my list because I anticipated a whole bunch more coming from the audience. So if anybody in the audience wants to submit a question, please do it in the next 4 minutes once I ask the question. Otherwise, we'll go to the closing statements. So this question, and you might know there's a certain bias in it when I ask it. Current law says that cities can charge utility companies to use city right-of-way, that counties can't charge utility companies to use county right-of-way. Is this appropriate? Or would you support a change to existing law to allow counties to charge utility companies to use county right-of-way?
So this one I would have to look into a little closer. It actually would go through the Energy and Environment Committee probably that I'm on, or it's going to go through a Land Use Committee. So, but it's an issue that we face. McMinnville, actually, we are our own utility. McMinnville has the pleasure of having great utility rates compared to everybody who's using PGE. But when you start charging, basically, well, let me go to the phone company, for example, phone lines. So the phone company or cable pays rent to be on the pole. So it drives up the rates to everybody else. So now landlines are being dropped like mad because of what your phone bill, just because of all the taxes and fees that are on it, you're dealing with those. And this is why I'd want to look into this a little closer before I said yes or no one way or the other, is everything that's happening, because all of a sudden we could start driving up utility rates when we start getting into some of these things. So I can't say yes or no on this last question just because I haven't had the firsthand experience with it. So, but anything that looks like it's going to drive up rates to homeowners, I am not going to support. I can tell you that.
Thanks. Ken? You heard what the current law says.
Yeah, but I need more time on this, so let me hear it again.
Current law says that cities can charge utility companies to use city right-of-way, that counties can't charge utility companies to use county right-of-way. Is this appropriate, or would you support a change to existing law to allow counties to charge utility companies to use county right-of-way?
Well, I'm for companies paying their way. And if a fairness issue comes into this on are we giving away rights to some companies and not others, then we need to come to fairness around this. Maybe cities shouldn't be charging in their right-of-ways. But that's all I've got on this one. This is a new one for me. But that's how I would approach this subject. It may not go the way you propose that the county would charge more. Maybe we look at the cities not charging. Let's make it even across the boards, both city and county.
Fair enough. I had to throw that question in. Are there any more questions from the audience? Steve? Did you write it down? Okay. All right. Okay, let me read this and then we'll see if we can work on a question. I drive an electric car. It costs me $150 in electricity to drive 10,000 miles. None of this money goes to highway maintenance. So the question is, should it?
What are they going to do to solve that problem? We get more and more electric cars on the road every day.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and try it like this. Should the state develop laws that require owners of electric cars to fund transportation needs?
Yes, I understand the question. The problem is gas tax. You drive a gasoline-powered car, you put gas in the car, that's taxed heavily, it goes to the state, it pays for the roads. You don't put gas in an electric car, so you're not paying tax. So how do we have electric car owners participate in maintaining the roads they're driving on? Yeah, this was struggled with in the legislature, and there is some privacy issues. People kind of hesitate to have a device put in their car to find out how much they're driving and have that reported to the state. So this is the problem that we're wrestling with now. But I think as the fairness issue comes up and maybe some of these security and privacy issues are addressed and solved, that we will. And also a factor is weight. Well, these cars are lighter, so maybe they don't get as taxed as much. Maybe miles per gallon is a good rate. I mean, that's kind of fair if your vehicle's heavy and you're breaking the roads up more with it. You're paying more in gas to move that around. So there's some factors that have to come in on electric cars. These are lightweight, so it's not just miles. You would have to take into the weight consideration to even make it a fair across the board. But as we get more and more electric cars, there's going to be more and more concern and interest in having those people contribute to our road system in a fair way. And I want to be in on that conversation on how we do that.
Thanks. Let me try that for Jim now. Should the state adopt laws to require owners of electric cars to make a contribution to transportation needs?
Well, you're looking at someone who sat on transportation in 2009 and the next session who dealt with this issue multiple times, and you're probably looking at the person who was the biggest opponent against putting something inside my car because I don't want government to know where I'm at. So, but the easiest way to fix it with an electric car is you just do it through your registration. We know they're going to pay on average about $35 to $50 a month in fuel tax if they were putting fuel in the car. So we just do it with the registration is what I proposed. It's straightforward. Now I know I pay $500 a year in taxes. They can pay it monthly. They can do it when they register their car. It's simple, it's straightforward, and now they're paying and helping contribute to maintain the roads at that point. So I was someone who actually wanted to own an electric car when the Tesla first came out, but to get my wife to let me spend $100,000 on a car that could go 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds was real tough. So. But I tried to argue the fuel mileage thing. Hey, I don't have to buy gas, honey. Look at this. So didn't work. I didn't get the car, but that's the easiest way to deal with the electric car scenarios. Do it through the registration or a monthly bill that they send to DMV that's collected and pay the tax that way. That way you're not being tracked where you're driving and what you're doing.
Okay, thanks. You can stay right there. It's now time to finish it up with closing statements by each of the candidates. First, Jim will have 3 minutes, and then Ken will have 3 minutes.
I'd like to thank you for having me here today. It's always a pleasure coming to the Kiwanis debate. This one's great. We have the television, all the news outlets and everything here that people get to see it across the county and across the city through cable. And I just always enjoy being here in front of this group. This and the McMinnville City Club are probably the two best debates and worthwhile debates that we're at and that we do every time because it's spread across the county. I hope you got a good idea of where I stand on a lot of the issues. One of the things that we pride ourselves in is keeping our office doors open to all of you. When you call with an idea or an issue, we're very responsive on getting things done for you. If you talk to any of the constituent issues that we have and that we've worked on, we've been very successful in getting a lot of things taken care of for people right here in Yamhill County. The other thing that we try to do is take care of a lot of the wrongs that government's done to individuals, and we look for legislation to replace old laws that should be overturned and that are no longer useful in society today. So it's real easy for all of us to go through, and I'm going to introduce this law, this law, this law, and we just go on, but very seldom do we go back and go through the books and realize, you know what, we should get rid of this law or this law and get rid of some of the laws that are on the books that we do face. I look forward to going back and serving Yamhill County. There's a lot of stuff that we have that we want to work on. One of the things that I've learned through the emergency preparedness, not only in land use, but one of the things, we have lots of individuals that take medication that they can't afford to be without. And if we ever suffered like an earthquake or anything like that and someone's on blood thinners or blood pressure medicine or things like that, you only have a 30-day supply. Well, what if you're at the end of that time? You're going to be in trouble if you're not able to get to the pharmacy to get it replaced. We have a bill that's already dropped and ready to go that I have co-sponsored across the aisle, where we're going to actually increase that to 60 days out, so you're always 30 days ahead. This is very important to our senior citizens. The other thing I want to do is start looking at relief for our seniors in the medical industry, because we're putting so many people on the medical system right now. You're looking at the one person who made Cover Oregon produce a business plan that showed that it would fail. The one person who stood up and spoke out against Cover Oregon on the floor and sat down and voted no on it across the House. You're going to find that I'll stand up for you and what's right and wrong every time, and knowing that I'm going to come back here ready for you to hold me accountable for anything that I do or any decision that I make in the state legislature. And I encourage you to go watch the YouTube videos of where I was at on healthcare, because I get concerned about our Medicare patients because we're expanding so much that there's not going to be any money there for our senior citizens. So I'm concerned about that. I will be fighting for everyone there, and I hope you all choose to send me back to Salem for you. Thank you.
I'd like to tell you a story about knocking on doors. I've knocked on thousands, and this one in particular comes to mind. I had a conversation with a woman. I asked, what is the biggest challenge you see facing our community? And then I listen, and I've learned a lot, and I've been changed by it. I'm in touch with this district. I know something about representing it. This particular, we had a good conversation. As it often is, it's about education. It's about living wage jobs. I was halfway down the walk, and her 13-year-old daughter called me back. And she got eyeball to eyeball with me on the doorstep and said, I love my STEM program at school. Science, technology, engineering, and math. We need more STEM funding. STEM in my school is what gives the kids the opportunity to reach their potential. She said to me, I'm choked up now at this point, 13-year-old giving me a lecture on how to be a good representative. And she then went on to say, we don't have enough advanced classes in my school. I want more school funding. It's an incredible experience. And I was thinking to myself, her name is Laura, I want to keep track of this one. And about the time her mother says, you probably want to keep track of this one. When she grows up, she's going to really be something. I was thinking this, and I said to her, I was thinking the same thing. Well, that STEM funding, that was a vote that Jim was absent for. And Jim's been absent for a lot of times in the legislature. There were 176 votes on the last legislature, and he missed 52 of them. That's almost a third. I promise to you to be your representative in the legislature, on the floor, making the votes, being present, representing our district. At the beginning, I told you about some of the things, the experiences I've had. And I know something about agriculture and business and manufacturing, community service, because of the opportunity that I've had. I want to make sure that everyone in this district has opportunity. Opportunity for excellent education and for living wage jobs. And for those reasons, I ask for your vote to send me to the legislature. Thank you.
I think we should have a round of applause.
And thanks again. Thanks, Jim. You know, I really appreciate people who serve in elected offices and who run for elected offices. I don't think I would have the nerve or the courage to do it and to put myself out. And so whenever somebody does do that, I think they should be honored for that, and just to let you two guys know that I think you are appreciated by me, but also by the community as a whole. Also want to thank our sponsors, the radio station, KLYC, which is 1260 on your dial. Also, McMinnville Community Media, and of course the News Register. Thanks to Steve for arranging all this. Finally, I'd just like to close the meeting by saying that the McMinnville Kiwanis Club has been serving this community for 90 years. It's part of a global organization, and that global organization is out there serving children and communities all over the globe. That's all I have. Make it a good day. Thank you.
And there you have it. KLYC broadcasting live from the McMinnville Communities, the Grand Ballroom, 3rd Street in McMinnville. And of what you've been hearing is the candidates for House District 24, the incumbent Jim Weidner and Weidner, and Ken Moore, the challenger in that race. Now, next Thursday at the same time and station and location is going to be another candidates forum. This is going to be for Yamhill County Commissioner Sal Peralta and Stan Permisic, and you'll be able to hear that live here on AM 20 KLYC. We did shoot video of this. We will have it up on our podcast later today. This is AM 1260 KLYC. You've been listening to Live Candidates Forum, courtesy of the Kiwanis Club in McMinnville. Do want to thank our media partners, McMinnville Community Media and the News Register, for helping bring the issues and the candidates to you, the voters. AM 1260 KLYC, McMinnville, Newburgh.